What if the very foundation of royal privilege could be stripped away, not by scandalous tabloids, not by whispers in palace corridors, but by the stern voices of Parliament echoing through the historic halls of Westminster? What if Meghan Markle, once welcomed with fanfare as a modernizing breath in the monarchy, now found herself facing the unimaginable, the threat of losing her royal status by the very lawmakers who had once applauded her? This isn't just another royal spat. This isn't just a clash of personalities. This is Parliament, the democratic heartbeat of Britain, turning its gaze on a duchess, weighing her future like a vote of confidence in a prime minister. And Meghan? She reportedly broke down in tears. But were those tears of heartbreak, betrayal, or something else? That's the story we're about to unravel. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this for a moment. A young American actress marries into the most famous royal family on earth. The world tunes in. The promise is of unity, modernity, and diversity, a royal family stepping boldly into the 21st century. Fast forward, and instead of unity, there is fracture. Instead of modernity, there is backlash. Instead of adoration, there is suspicion. And now, instead of stability, there's Parliament drafting motions that could erase Meghan's status as a duchess altogether. How did we get here? What went so wrong that a fairy tale wedding has led to the possibility of political intervention? Let's dig deeper, because this isn't just a royal squabble. It's about power, perception, and the strange marriage of monarchy and democracy. Britain is unique. It clings to its traditions, yet prides itself on parliamentary sovereignty. The Queen, or now King, may reign, but Parliament rules. And when those two powers collide, history is written in shocking ways. Think back to the 17th century. Parliament clashed with a king, and that clash ended with Charles I losing his throne and his head. Now, centuries later, no one's losing their head, but reputations, titles, legitimacy, those are on the chopping block. So here's the real question. Was Meghan's downfall inevitable, or is she simply the lightning rod for deeper frustrations with the monarchy itself? The truth is, Parliament doesn't move lightly. It doesn't waste time on trivialities. If they're even entertaining this discussion, it means something seismic has shifted in how Meghan is seen by the political establishment, by the people they represent, and even by those closest to the throne. And Meghan's reaction? Tears. Real or calculated? Genuine heartbreak or a desperate attempt to sway sympathy? People close to her insist it was real. Sobs echoing through Montecito as she realized the life she had fought for, defended, and rebranded might crumble at the stroke of a vote. But those who distrust her call it just another performance. So I ask you, when you see Meghan in tears, do you see a victim or a strategist? Do you see a woman broken by betrayal, or an actress still playing to the audience? Here's another twist. Parliament, unlike the palace, thrives on accountability. Politicians are voted in and out by the people. If they sense public mood shifting, they follow it. And right now, surveys suggest Meghan's popularity in the UK has plummeted. That isn't just tabloid chatter. That's hard political currency. Because when voters grumble, MPs listen. And when MPs listen, they act. Could Meghan's tears really be the sound of democracy colliding with royalty in real time? Let's zoom out. Meghan and Harry left Britain for freedom. They carved their own path, making deals with Netflix, Spotify, publishers. They wanted independence. But independence from the crown doesn't erase their titles. Titles are sticky, powerful symbols. They grant prestige, access, leverage. And now, Parliament is considering peeling that away. Irony, isn't it? The very independence Meghan sought may have sown the seeds of Parliament's case against her. But let's pause here. Do you remember the wedding? The choir singing Stand By Me. The horse-drawn carriage. The sea of flags. People believe this was history in the making, a royal family finally reflecting the face of modern Britain. Yet fast forward a few years, and many of those same citizens are calling their MPs, saying, strip her title, and the pretense. How quickly dreams turn into disillusion. Still, it's not just public opinion that matters. Parliament is fueled by documents, testimony, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Reports suggest lawmakers have been quietly gathering material, letters, statements, perhaps even agreements Meghan made when she first entered the royal fold. If true, Those could become the ammunition in a campaign to erase her royal privileges. But what could be in those documents? And who leaked them? These questions open the door to betrayal of the highest order. And betrayal, make no mistake, is the heartbeat of this entire saga. Betrayal of trust, betrayal of family, betrayal of public faith. Meghan has accused the monarchy of betraying her mental health. The monarchy accused her of abandoning duty. Now Parliament appears poised to accuse her of betraying the very institution she swore to serve. 3 betrayals, 3 narratives, all clashing in the court of public opinion. But think about this. What does stripping Meghan's status even mean? It means that every time her name is written, Duchess of Sussex could vanish. It means her children's royal links could weaken. It means her brand, built on royal association, might fracture. It means, quite simply, that the fairy tale would officially be over. And isn't that the real heartbreak? Not just losing a title, but losing the dream that it symbolized? Now, let's pivot to emotion. Imagine sitting in Montecito, the California sun pouring in, your children playing in the garden, and then hearing news from across the ocean. Parliament is debating your very identity. Imagine your life, your status, your global platform, all up for discussion by strangers in another land. Wouldn't you cry? Wouldn't you break down? Or would you fight back? And here's where it gets darker. Some insiders claim Meghan's tears weren't only about losing status. They were about losing safety. Because if Parliament acts, she and Harry may lose protection. No security, no automatic shields. Just celebrities in a mansion, vulnerable to every critic, every paparazzo, every hater. That's not just political humiliation, that's a risk to life. But then again, what if those tears were about something deeper still? About betrayal from someone she trusted, someone who whispered into Parliament's ear, feeding them the fuel they needed. Because make no mistake, Parliament doesn't act in a vacuum. It listens to voices. Some of those voices, reportedly, came from very close to Meghan herself. Which raises the chilling question, who inside her circle betrayed her? And here's the kicker. The decision hasn't even been finalized. The vote looms. The debates rage. But the emotional fallout is already tearing Meghan apart. Parliament hasn't even struck, and yet the blow has landed. That's how powerful perception is. That's how powerful symbolism is. So we return to the beginning. Meghan Markle, breaking in tears as Parliament moves against her. A woman who once embodied royal hope, now facing parliamentary judgment. But remember, this is just the beginning of our journey. Because what Parliament does next, and the shocking revelations behind it, will shake not only Meghan but the entire monarchy to its core. And here's where I leave you, for now. Because what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the very institution that welcomed you with open arms suddenly turned around and declared you unworthy? What if the crown that once symbolized your fairy tale became the weight dragging you into the depths of public humiliation? That's the question hanging over Meghan Markle right now, as whispers echo through Parliament's chambers. Should her royal status be stripped away? It's a scenario no one imagined on her wedding day. Yet here we are, watching the story unfold in real time. Picture the moment. A packed chamber in Westminster, rows of lawmakers hunched over papers, debating not taxes, not laws, but a duchess's fate. The echoes of centuries-old debates ring in the walls, voices that once decided the fate of kings and queens now murmuring about Meghan Markle. And somewhere thousands of miles away, in Montecito, Meghan's phone buzzes. The news filters through. Parliament is moving against her. Reports say her tears flowed instantly. But were those tears of pain or of fear? This isn't just gossip. This isn't just another tabloid story. This is Parliament, the very embodiment of Britain's democracy, pointing its finger at royalty and saying, enough. That doesn't happen lightly. And the timing couldn't be worse for Meghan, who has tried to build her brand, her family, her independence, outside palace walls. Let's rewind. Do you remember the image of Meghan on her wedding day? The world stopped. The veil, the choir, the moment Harry lifted her hand in the carriage ride through Windsor. It was history, an American actress stepping into the monarchy, the promise of a fresh chapter. The hope was clear. She would modernize the royal family, bring diversity, bring global appeal. People cheered. Commentators called it the start of a new era. Now fast forward. That era ended in a storm of accusations, racism, mental health struggles, alleged betrayals, and bitter splits. Meghan and Harry walked away from royal duties, but they didn't walk away from their titles. The Duchess of Sussex remained a duchess. Until now. Because Parliament doesn't see titles as symbolic baubles. They see them as constitutional markers. And if the people grow restless, lawmakers listen. And the people? Poll after poll shows Meghan's popularity sinking in the UK. She's loved in Hollywood circles, admired by some abroad, but in Britain, the very land of her Duchess title, her reputation has collapsed. Isn't it ironic? The title Duchess of Sussex ties her to a county that polls say overwhelmingly disapprove of her. How do you hold a title when those you represent don't want you? But here's where it gets darker. Reports suggest there's been talk, late-night strategy sessions among MPs, of drafting a formal motion. Not symbolic. Not just chatter. A move that could force the palace's hand, stripping Meghan of her royal recognition. It's unprecedented. Parliament usually avoids meddling directly in royal matters. But Meghan's case? It's different. It's political now. Imagine being Meghan, reading those headlines. Imagine hearing that strangers, elected officials across an ocean, were debating your very identity. Wouldn't you cry? Wouldn't you feel betrayed by a system you thought you had left behind? Yet there's the twist. You can leave the palace, but the palace never fully leaves you. Now, let's ask the uncomfortable question. Do you think Meghan's tears were purely emotional, or were they strategic? She is, after all, an actress. She knows the power of optics. The image of a duchess in tears as Parliament moves against her. Doesn't that tug at the public's heartstrings? Or does it make critics roll their eyes and say, here we go again? Consider the contradictions. Meghan wanted freedom, yet held tight to the royal title. She wanted independence, yet traded heavily on the prestige of being a duchess. She wanted privacy, yet shared her life on global platforms. These contradictions became weapons, and Parliament has seized them. The whispers didn't start this week. Insiders say discussions began months ago, quietly. A letter here, a debate there. What was once murmured in corridors is now entering the chamber. And if there's one thing Parliament thrives on, it's momentum. Once the whispers grow, they become a roar. Meghan may already be caught in a tidal wave she cannot stop. But this is about more than Meghan. It's about Parliament asserting itself over royalty. Britain's history is defined by this tug-of-war. Remember, Parliament once forced a king to his death. They forced abdications. They've stripped titles before. Meghan's case is simply the latest battlefield where monarchy and democracy clash. And here's the twist. It's not just about her. It's about Harry. It's about the children. If Meghan loses her status, what happens to Archie and Lilibet? Do their titles weaken? Do they vanish? Do they become private citizens in the eyes of Britain? The ripple effect could be devastating. Not just for Meghan's image, but for her children's legacy. Let's not forget the emotional stakes. Meghan has spoken openly about her struggles with mental health, her sense of isolation, the cruelty of media scrutiny. Now imagine layering parliamentary condemnation on top of that. It's not just tabloid headlines anymore. It's official. It's historic. No wonder the reports say she broke down in tears. But we must also ask, who benefits? Who gains if Meghan loses her title? Parliament may say it's about accountability. Critics may say it's about politics. Royalists may cheer. But is there someone in the palace who quietly welcomes this? Someone who sees Meghan erased as a step toward restoring order? Think about that. Because every move in this saga has players, and every player has motives. And betrayal? Oh, betrayal lurks here too. Parliament doesn't invent accusations. Someone provides them. Leaks, testimonies, private letters, they all surface somehow. Which means someone, somewhere, close to Meghan, may have fed the fire. A friend? A relative? An insider? That's the knife that cuts deepest. Now pause. Take in the irony. Meghan left Britain to escape its institutions. Yet here she is, more entangled than ever. Parliament debates her. The palace watches. The people judge. And Meghan? She cries. Tears that symbolize more than sadness. They symbolize the collapse of a dream. But remember, this is just the beginning. Parliament hasn't voted yet. The motion isn't finalized. This is the storm before the storm. The tears before the verdict. The whispers before the gavel falls. And if the whispers are this powerful, Can you even imagine what the roar will sound like when Parliament finally speaks? So tell me, how does a whisper become a storm? How does one quiet conversation in the corridors of Westminster turn into a political avalanche that shakes the monarchy itself? That's exactly what happened when the first murmurs about Meghan Markle's royal status began to ripple through Parliament. At first, it was nothing more than cautious side chatter, a raised eyebrow here, a subtle suggestion there. But in politics, whispers are dangerous. They multiply. They grow teeth. They feed off scandal, off discontent, off opportunity. And soon, the whispers became impossible to ignore. It started late one evening, long after most MPs had gone home. A few stragglers lingered in committee rooms, their voices low, their faces tense. Someone mentioned Meghan. Someone else nodded. A few words were exchanged, words that hinted at something unthinkable, stripping her of her royal status. Not because of a single scandal, but because of a pattern, a narrative, an accumulation of choices and contradictions that had left her vulnerable. But ask yourself, was this about Meghan's actions, or was it about the monarchy itself needing a scapegoat? Let's be clear. Parliament doesn't normally meddle in royal titles. That's sacred ground, usually left to the palace. For lawmakers to even discuss it, something extraordinary had to be brewing. And what was brewing wasn't just frustration with Meghan's behavior. It was frustration with the entire system. Politicians, already juggling public anger over costs of living, healthcare crises, and scandals of their own, saw Meghan as a lightning rod. Criticizing her was safe. Targeting her was popular. She had become the perfect distraction. Convenient, isn't it? But here's where it gets more chilling. The whispers weren't coming only from politicians. Reports suggest that certain voices, connected voices, were feeding information into Westminster's back channels. Letters, testimonies, insider accounts. Information that lawmakers could use to justify their discussions. Where did it all come from? Who had that access? Who had that motive? Think about it. Because betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from those close enough to wound you. And let's talk about those first private meetings. Imagine the scene. A dimly lit committee room. Papers scattered across oak tables. A handful of MPs, voices hushed, debating the Duchess of Sussex. They weighed her scandals like evidence in a courtroom. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the memoir, the ongoing rift with the royal family. Each moment wasn't just personal, it was political ammunition. The irony? Every attempt Meghan and Harry made to tell their side of the story was now being used against them. Do you see the contradiction? Meghan wanted to free herself from palace control, yet by speaking out, she gave Parliament exactly the leverage it needed to question her place in the monarchy. Isn't that the cruelest twist? That the voice she fought so hard to use became the very weapon turned back on her. But think about the lawmakers themselves. Many of them represent constituencies where Meghan's name is met with anger, mockery, even disgust. Polls show her approval ratings plummeting in Britain. MPs are not blind. They read the numbers. They hear the complaints. And if their voters are shouting, they will echo those shouts in Parliament. That's how democracy works. Which begs the question, was this really about Meghan? Or was she simply a reflection of Britain's deeper frustrations with the monarchy, the media, and the system as a whole? One MP, reportedly, put it bluntly, if the monarchy is to survive, it cannot carry passengers who damage the institution. Passenger. That's how they referred to Meghan. Not a duchess. Not a figure of history. A passenger. Disposable. Replaceable. That single word tells you everything about how far she had fallen in their eyes. And the whispers spread further. From committee rooms to late-night dinners. From political clubs to private homes. Soon, it wasn't a question of should we talk about Meghan's title, but how soon can we act? Lawmakers who had never cared about royal gossip before suddenly found themselves rehearsing arguments, calculating votes, even drafting motions. The idea had taken root. And once it does, it grows like ivy, unstoppable, wrapping itself around every conversation until it's everywhere. But here's the detail no one expected. Inside those whispers, a name surfaced. A name that carried weight. A name Meghan never thought she would hear in this context. And when that name was whispered into Parliament's halls, the entire debate shifted from casual chatter to deadly serious consideration. Who was it? What role did they play? And why did their betrayal cut so deep? For Meghan, sitting thousands of miles away in California, The whispers felt like thunder. Friends called. Headlines erupted. Analysts debated on live TV. Suddenly, it wasn't just rumor, it was momentum. And momentum in Parliament is dangerous. Because once MPs sense blood in the water, they don't stop. They hunt. Let's pause for a moment and put yourself in her shoes. Imagine knowing that in the seat of power across the ocean, strangers in suits are dissecting your life, weighing your worth, plotting your erasure. Imagine the helplessness of that moment. Would you lash out? Would you cry? Would you plan your counterattack? Meghan, according to sources, broke down. But behind those tears, there had to be calculation. Because when the whispers become a roar, you have two choices, surrender or fight. Which do you think she chose? And here's the irony of it all. Meghan's story was supposed to be about love, a prince choosing his bride, a family embracing diversity, a monarchy evolving. But now, that same story is being dissected by lawmakers as evidence of failure. Her fairy tale, once celebrated under cathedral ceilings, is now picked apart under fluorescent lights in Parliament. And isn't that the cruelest stage of all? But the whispers didn't just stay in Westminster. They leaked. They found their way into the press, into tabloids hungry for drama, into the ears of the public. And once the public heard them, the pressure mounted even more. MPs suddenly found themselves bombarded with questions. When will the motion be tabled? How fast will it happen? Why hasn't action been taken yet? The whispers had become a demand. And here lies the cliffhanger. Because just when it seemed like Parliament's whispers were growing louder by the day, a new detail surfaced. A document. A letter. Something tangible that shifted the entire debate from speculation to reality. And within that document was a revelation so shocking, so personal, that it threatened not just Meghan's title, but her entire legacy. What if I told you that Meghan Markle's entire royal journey was built on a pact? A silent understanding. A deal made not in public, but in whispered exchanges behind palace walls. And what if that pact, the very foundation of her entry into the royal machine, was the same thing Parliament would later use to pull the rug from under her? This isn't just rumor. This isn't just gossip. This is the forgotten pact, a promise Meghan believed would protect her, but one that may now haunt her. Let's rewind to the beginning. The world saw Meghan's wedding day as a fairy tale, but behind the scenes, there were negotiations, concessions, boundaries. The palace is not just about romance. It's about protocol, image, and survival. Insiders claim Meghan was reminded again and again, you are not marrying just a man. You are marrying an institution. Can you imagine hearing that? On the eve of your happiest day, being told your marriage is less about love and more about duty? And here's the thing. Meghan, ambitious and outspoken, didn't just accept those rules without question. According to some reports, she pushed back. She wanted clarity. She wanted freedom. She wanted assurances that she wouldn't simply vanish into the rigid mold that had crushed so many royals before her. And so, a pact was formed. Between Meghan, Harry, and the crown. Between a woman who demanded autonomy and an institution terrified of modern disruption. But what was in this pact? That's where the story gets murky and dangerous. Some say Meghan agreed to limit her public political statements. Others whisper she promised to uphold certain appearances, to lend her face and charm to events chosen by the palace. In exchange, she would be shielded, protected, integrated into the monarchy as a figure of progress. Doesn't it sound almost like a contract? Not written on paper, but etched in mutual need. Now here's where it gets interesting. Parliament has allegedly unearthed references to this very understanding. Letters, notes, maybe even verbal confirmations recorded at the time. If true, that pact could be twisted into a weapon. They could argue Meghan broke her end of the deal, that she abandoned her royal role while clinging to her royal title, that she benefited from the prestige while spurning the responsibility. Think about it. To the public, it looks like Meghan wanted the best of both worlds. And in politics, perception is reality. Isn't that the contradiction that fuels the outrage? But let's add another twist. The palace never publicly acknowledged the pact. Of course not. It would shatter the illusion of the monarchy as a timeless, untouchable institution. So now, when Parliament points to this forgotten agreement, the palace is caught in a bind. Deny it, and they risk exposing their own double dealings. Acknowledge it, and they admit Meghan's rebellion had justification. Either way, Meghan's tears aren't just about losing status. They're about being trapped in a game she never fully controlled. Now I want you to put yourself in her position. Imagine thinking you had a safety net. Imagine believing that the monarchy, despite its flaws, had at least offered you a fair path. And then, years later, to discover that same promise being dragged into Parliament as evidence against you. How would you feel? Betrayed? Confused? Furious? Maybe all three. And betrayal, let's not forget, is the theme running through this story like a poisoned thread. Meghan once trusted that pact. She trusted Harry's reassurances. She trusted the institution. And now, each layer of that trust is unraveling. Parliament is saying, you broke your promise. The palace is saying, we never guaranteed anything. And Meghan is left holding the pieces, weeping in California while her future is debated across the Atlantic. But here's the irony. Meghan's critics say she's manipulative, always calculating. If that's true, then maybe she thought she could outplay the pact from the beginning. Maybe she believed she could use the royal status to amplify her voice while slowly stepping out of duty. If so, Parliament's move is not just political, it's payback. A reminder that you can't outmaneuver centuries of entrenched power. And yet, isn't that what makes Meghan's story so fascinating? She is both victim and strategist. Both betrayed and betrayer. Both trapped and defiant. That contradiction is why she provokes such strong emotions. People either see her as a woman crushed by a cruel system or as a woman who tried to game the system and lost. Which side are you on? Let's return to Westminster. Imagine MPs huddled around a document, an archived letter or a memo referencing the terms of Meghan's entry. One lawmaker slaps the paper on the table and says, "Here's our proof." The room goes quiet. They've got their leverage. What was once a debate of opinion now feels like a case of broken promises. And when promises are broken, Parliament smells blood. But there's one more layer. Who reminded them of this pact? Who dug it up? Because these documents don't surface by accident. They are brought forth, deliberately, by someone who knows where to look. Could it have been a senior palace aide? A former insider turned whistleblower? Or, and this is the cruelest possibility, someone from Meghan's own camp, disillusioned and ready to burn bridges? The forgotten pact is no longer forgotten. It's alive. It's breathing. It's fueling the fire in Parliament's belly. And Meghan? She is watching it all from afar, realizing that what she once believed was her shield is now the blade being pressed against her. But here's the cliffhanger. Within that same set of documents, insiders claim there is a name, a signature, a personal guarantee tied to Meghan's integration into the monarchy. And when that name surfaced, Parliament knew the story had just escalated beyond Meghan herself. Because if that name is exposed, the fallout will stretch far beyond one duchess. It could shake the monarchy's foundations all over again. What if a single piece of paper could destroy everything? Not a scandalous video, not a bombshell interview, just ink on parchment. That's the terrifying reality Meghan Markle faced when whispers in Parliament solidified into something tangible. A letter, a document so charged, so damning, that it shifted the debate from rumor to reality. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was evidence. And the words on that page? They cut deeper than Meghan could have ever imagined. So let's ask the question straight away. How can one letter carry the weight of an entire duchess's future? To answer that, you need to understand the history of correspondence in the monarchy. Letters aren't just notes, they're power. Think of Edward VIII's abdication letter. Think of Diana's handwritten notes, which still haunt the monarchy decades later. A royal letter is never private, not really. It's a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right, or wrong, moment to explode. And this letter? According to insiders, it was written years ago, buried in archives, forgotten, until someone unearthed it. A ghost from the past, suddenly alive in Parliament's hands. But here's the twist. It wasn't just Meghan's words that mattered. It was the context. It was who the letter was addressed to. And that detail is what turned this from a minor embarrassment into a weapon. Imagine Meghan, newly married, still adjusting to palace life. She writes a letter, emotional, raw, vulnerable. Maybe it was to a senior royal. Maybe it was to an advisor. Maybe even to Parliament itself. In it, she makes promises, or confessions, or pleas. No one knows the exact wording, but insiders claim it contained commitments about her role, her duty, her loyalty. And now, years later, Those same words are being held against her as proof that she betrayed her end of the bargain. Can you feel the sting of that betrayal? To write something in confidence, believing it would stay hidden, only to have it resurface in the cold light of Parliament, dissected by strangers who know nothing of your pain. Do you think Meghan felt foolish? Do you think she felt used? Or do you think she felt furious? Furious that someone chose this moment, of all moments, to bring that letter back into play? Let's be real. Politics is a game of timing. And the timing of this letter's appearance was no accident. Parliament was already circling. The public mood was sour. The press was relentless. And then, like a match tossed on dry leaves, this letter ignited the firestorm. Lawmakers who were hesitant suddenly had proof. Newspapers had headlines. Meghan had a nightmare. But here's where it gets contradictory. Some claim the letter wasn't as incriminating as Parliament made it seem, that it was taken out of context, that Meghan's vulnerable words were twisted into obligations she never truly agreed to, that it was less a pact and more a plea for understanding. If that's true, then the letter isn't evidence, it's exploitation. And doesn't that make this whole saga even darker? Picture it. A closed parliamentary session. The letter is read aloud. MPs shift in their seats. Some nod in agreement, others raise eyebrows. The atmosphere changes. This is no longer theoretical. This is tangible. Words they can quote, words they can use. And somewhere, a politician leans forward and says, if she promised this, and she failed, then she cannot remain a duchess. Just like that, her future hangs on the interpretation of a letter written years ago in a moment of weakness. But wait, who leaked it? Who placed that letter in Parliament's lap? That's the question that keeps Meghan up at night. Was it a palisade with old grudges? A disillusioned friend? Or someone in politics itself, looking to settle scores? Whoever it was, they didn't just expose Meghan. They betrayed her at her most vulnerable. And isn't betrayal always the cruelest weapon? Now let's think about Harry. Imagine him seeing this unfold. His wife's private words becoming parliamentary ammunition. Did he rage? Did he call his lawyers? Did he vow to fight? Reports suggest he was livid. But here's the cruel twist. Anger doesn't erase ink. Once a letter is written, it's permanent. And Parliament knows how to weaponize permanence. Have you ever written something in the heat of the moment? An email, a text, a letter? Only to regret it later? Imagine that regret magnified on a global scale. That's Meghan's reality. And the irony? She's always been praised for her eloquence, her ability to use words to inspire. But this time, her words became shackles. The very tool she used to elevate herself became the chain Parliament could use to drag her down. The media, of course, pounced. Headlines screamed about Meghan's broken promise. Talk shows debated her honesty. Social media split into camps, those who defended her vulnerability and those who mocked her as manipulative. And every time her tears surfaced in Montecito, critics sneered. She brought it on herself. Doesn't it feel brutal? Doesn't it feel almost orchestrated? But here's the kicker. That letter didn't just reveal Meghan's commitments. It hinted at something bigger. Something, or someone, behind the scenes who influenced her decisions at the time. A shadowy presence. A guiding hand. And when Parliament read between the lines, they realized this wasn't just about Meghan. It was about who had shaped her choices. That revelation sent shockwaves. Because if Meghan's actions were influenced, even partially, by someone else, then the debate wasn't about one duchess anymore. It was about networks, influence, and motives that stretched far beyond her. Which begs the question, who was really pulling the strings? And that's where we leave this chapter. A single letter, unearthed from the past, now threatening Meghan's future. Words meant for private eyes now dissected by the nation. Promises turned into chains. And the haunting question that lingers. If one letter could shake Parliament, what else is out there, waiting to be revealed? Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when two of Britain's oldest powers, the monarchy and Parliament, find themselves staring each other down over the fate of one woman? That's exactly what unfolded after Meghan Markle's private letter was unearthed. Suddenly, the quiet whispers of Westminster weren't just about Meghan anymore. They had spilled over into something far bigger, a direct confrontation between the palace and Parliament. And here's the question that should send shivers down your spine. Who actually rules Britain when the chips are down? The crown, cloaked in centuries of tradition? Or Parliament, armed with the voice of the people? Let's set the stage. On one side, the palace, guardians of secrecy, terrified of precedent. If Parliament strips Meghan, it opens the door to lawmakers meddling in royal affairs anytime they wish. That is dangerous territory for the monarchy. On the other side, Parliament, emboldened by the letter, sensing public frustration, seeing an opportunity to assert control over the very institution that, in theory, sits above politics. And in the middle, Meghan Markle, a duchess by title, an outsider by origin, and now the spark threatening to ignite a centuries-old power struggle. Can you picture it? Behind the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, advisors huddle in tense meetings. Papers are shuffled, strategies whispered. The king, trying to project calm, asks his team, what is Parliament's true aim here? Because for the palace, it's not just about Meghan. It's about survival. If Parliament succeeds once, what's to stop them from doing it again and again until the monarchy itself is little more than a puppet? Now imagine Parliament, just a mile away in Westminster. The committee rooms are buzzing. Members argue furiously. Some say stripping Meghan's title is justice, accountability. Others warn it's reckless, a slippery slope. Voices rise. Fists pound tables. She betrayed the crown, shouts one MP. But what happens when they turn on the king? Counters another. The tension is thick enough to choke on. Here's the contradiction. Both sides claim to be protecting the monarchy. The palace insists Meghan's status is their prerogative, not Parliament's. Parliament argues that keeping her title undermines public trust in the monarchy, and thus the crown itself. Both claim righteousness. Both are digging in. And Meghan? She is thousands of miles away, powerless, while her name becomes the battlefield. But this isn't the first time Britain has seen such clashes. History echoes in these chambers. Think back to the Glorious Revolution. Think of Edward VIII forced to abdicate. Whenever monarchy and Parliament clash, something monumental follows. Do you think this will be any different? Or are we about to witness another chapter written in the blood and ink of conflict? Now, let's talk about the emotional impact. Inside the palace, courtiers mutter about betrayal. They insist that Meghan, by walking away from duty while clinging to privilege, invited this crisis. Yet in private, some admit a quieter fear. If Parliament succeeds, it weakens the crown's mystique. And without mystique, what is a monarchy but an expensive tradition? Meanwhile, in Parliament, MPs are feeling the heat from their constituents. Voters are angry about taxes, about scandals, about inequality. Meghan has become the perfect symbol, the lightning rod. By stripping her, lawmakers can appease the public, show strength, deflect criticism from themselves. It's political theater, yes, but theater with very real consequences. And here's where irony cuts deep. Meghan and Harry left Britain to escape scrutiny. They thought distance would grant freedom. Yet that very distance has only emboldened Parliament. If they want independence, some MPs argue, let them have it fully. Strip the titles, end the ties, cut the cord. The palace resists. The battle lines are drawn. But in every war, there are shadows. Whispers suggest that not all royals are on the same page. Some reportedly welcome Parliament's involvement. Quietly, they believe removing Meghan's title would restore dignity to the family. Others are horrified, fearing it will unleash chaos. Picture family dinners, cold stares, whispered arguments, tension thick enough to slice with a knife. The palace versus Parliament is one thing. But the palace versus itself? That's where the real danger lies. Now let's bring it back to Meghan. Reports say she wept when she heard Parliament's debates described on television. But ask yourself, how would you feel? To hear your name tossed like a football between politicians and royals, debated not as a human being, but as a symbol. Would you break down? Or would you fight back? The media, of course, is feasting on the drama. Headlines scream, palace panic, and Parliament's push. Talk shows pit commentators against each other. One insists Meghan deserves accountability. Another argues she's being scapegoated. The public is divided, but one thing is clear. The story has gripped the nation. And when a story grips the nation, politicians and royals alike are forced to act. And then comes the twist. Amid the shouting, the strategizing, the maneuvering, one parliamentarian stands up with a revelation. This is not about Meghan alone, they declare. This is about precedent. If we can hold her accountable, then no royal is untouchable. Silence falls. Eyes widen. Because in that moment, Everyone realizes the truth. Meghan is not the endgame. She is the opening move. The palace knows it. Parliament knows it. Meghan may be the spark, but the fire threatens to consume the entire monarchy. And here's the chilling thought. What if that's exactly what some people want? What if the greatest danger to Meghan Markle didn't come from Parliament, or the palace, or the press, but from someone inside her own circle? Someone she trusted. Someone she confided in. Someone who smiled to her face while whispering secrets into the ears of those who wanted her gone. That is the betrayal now at the heart of this saga. A betrayal so devastating that when Meghan discovered it, sources say she was left shaking, speechless, and in tears. Because let's be honest, Parliament didn't just stumble upon her private letter. Someone handed it to them. Someone close enough to know where it was, close enough to know how much damage it could cause. So the real question isn't just what's in the letter. The real question is, who betrayed Meghan? Let's start with the obvious possibilities. Could it have been a palace aide? Someone who resented Meghan's outspokenness, her refusal to play by the old rules? That would make sense. Courtiers have long guarded the monarchy's traditions like watchmen at the gate. Meghan's arrival, her independence, her refusal to bow to outdated customs, those were threats to everything they valued. Is it really hard to imagine one of them slipping documents into the hands of Parliament, smiling quietly as the Duchess unraveled? But there's another, darker possibility. What if the betrayal didn't come from palace walls at all, but from Meghan's own side? A friend, a relative, a former ally who decided their loyalty was no longer worth the price. Do you remember how many people drifted away from Meghan and Harry after the Oprah interview, after the Netflix documentary, after Spare? Each controversy peeled away another layer of trust. Sooner or later, someone was bound to turn. And betrayal from within always cuts deeper. Think about Meghan's own father, Thomas Markle. His decision to speak to the press before her wedding was one of the first cracks in her carefully constructed fairy tale. He was family. He was supposed to protect her. Instead, he sold her out. Now imagine that pattern repeating, years later, with someone else she trusted. Isn't it almost poetic in a tragic way? Here's the contradiction that makes this so fascinating. Meghan and Harry left the monarchy to protect themselves from betrayal. They said the palace had thrown them to the wolves. They said they needed freedom. Yet even in California, thousands of miles away, betrayal still found them. Doesn't that tell you something about the inevitability of power and politics? You can run, but you cannot hide. Not when you carry royal titles on your shoulders. Now, think of Meghan's perspective. Reports say she broke down when she realized the betrayal wasn't from faceless enemies, but from someone close. Imagine sitting in your Montecito home, your children asleep, your phone buzzing with news alerts, and suddenly piecing it together. The only way Parliament could have gotten hold of that letter was if someone in your own orbit gave it to them. Can you feel the shock? The nausea? The disbelief? Have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to find out they were undermining you behind your back? Multiply that by 1,000. That's Meghan's reality. And here's where it gets even more twisted. Betrayal doesn't just wound emotionally. It strengthens your enemies. Parliament, the palace, the press. They now had ammunition they never should have had. They had Meghan's private words, filtered and twisted, ready to be used against her. And all thanks to someone who once swore loyalty to her. But who was it? That's the million-dollar question. Some speculate it was a former staffer, bitter after their time in service. Others whisper about a family member, estranged but opportunistic. And a few even suggest it could have been someone Meghan still speaks to, someone still pretending to be loyal even now. The chilling part? Meghan herself reportedly doesn't know for sure. She has suspicions, yes, but no proof. And that uncertainty eats away at her every single day. Let's step back for a moment. Isn't betrayal the most human of themes? From Julius Caesar stabbed by Brutus, to Diana confiding in friends who later leaked to the press. Betrayal is the poison that always seeps into the cracks of power. Meghan's story is just the latest, and perhaps most brutal, example. But betrayal also reshapes alliances. Once Meghan realized someone close had turned, sources say she began to withdraw. Trust became scarce. Conversations grew shorter. Phone calls fewer. The circle around her tightened until only Harry remained firmly inside. Isn't that ironic? The woman who once dreamed of building a vast network of influence and compassion now finds herself isolated, stripped of allies, surrounded only by suspicion. And Harry? His fury reportedly shook the walls of their home. For him, this wasn't just politics, it was personal. He has spent years believing the institution betrayed his mother, betrayed him, betrayed Meghan. Now to find betrayal within their own camp? That was the final straw. But what could he do? Call out the traitor publicly? Hunt them down? Or grit his teeth and prepare for the next blow? Because make no mistake, the betrayal wasn't over. The letter was just the beginning. Once Parliament tasted blood, they wanted more. And who better to feed them than someone close to Meghan? Someone with access to the very details that could destroy her. Which leads us to the darkest twist of all. If one betrayal could deliver the letter, what else could follow? Emails, texts, conversations Meghan thought were private? Each new leak would weaken her case, strengthen Parliament's hand, and push the palace into a corner. Meghan was no longer fighting Parliament alone. She was fighting the ghost of someone she once trusted, someone who now lived in the shadows, feeding her enemies. And here's the cliffhanger. Because in Parliament's next closed-door session, after the letter had been read and dissected, a new envelope appeared. Different handwriting, different contents, but no less explosive. And when its pages were revealed, Meghan's name wasn't the only one on them. Have you ever cried so hard that the sound carried through the walls, that neighbors wondered what tragedy had struck? That's what sources claim happened inside Meghan Markle's Montecito mansion when the second envelope from Parliament was revealed. They say her sobs echoed through the halls like a storm, a raw, guttural cry of disbelief and despair. The world saw headlines. Parliament saw leverage. But what Meghan's friends saw was something different. A woman crumbling under the unbearable weight of betrayal and politics colliding. So here's the question. Why did this moment hit harder than anything before? She had survived tabloid attacks. She had endured family betrayals. She had weathered palace coldness. But this was Parliament. This was lawmakers across the ocean dissecting her identity, stripping her dignity, piece by piece. Can you imagine that? Living in sunny California, sipping coffee in the garden one day, and the next, hearing that your fate is being debated by strangers in Westminster? The new envelope wasn't just more evidence. It was a bombshell. It reportedly contained communications, notes, fragments of emails, maybe even private correspondences that suggested Meghan wasn't alone in her actions. Another name was tied to the controversy. Not Harry, not Doria, but someone else significant enough to rattle the debate. Parliament wasn't just looking at Meghan anymore. They were broadening the lens. And Meghan knew, in that instant, that this was no longer only about her. It was about anyone connected to her. Her cry, they say, wasn't just about humiliation. It was about fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of isolation. Fear of losing everything she had built. And let's pause here. Put yourself in her shoes. You've built a life, a brand, an identity. And suddenly, all of it feels like quicksand. Wouldn't you break down? Wouldn't you feel powerless as the ground slipped from under you? But here's where the contradiction lies. Meghan is not powerless. She's savvy, articulate, resourceful. She has allies in Hollywood, influence in media, connections in politics. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered. Power couldn't stop tears. Influence couldn't erase betrayal. And the cry that echoed in Montecito wasn't the cry of a duchess. It was the cry of a woman who realized the walls were closing in. Neighbors described seeing unusual activity at the mansion that night. Cars pulling up, lights burning late. Some say a crisis team was called in. Lawyers, PR advisors, confidants rushing to contain the damage. Because Meghan's cry, however human, was also dangerous. Optics matter. If the public saw her breaking, it would reinforce Parliament's case, that she was unfit for the role she had abandoned, yet clung to in name. The irony? The very act of breaking down made her appear weaker, when in truth, it might have been her most authentic moment yet. Now let's talk about Harry. Reports claim he was furious, not at Meghan, but at the situation. At Parliament. At the betrayal. At the endless cycle of attacks. He reportedly stormed through the house, demanding answers, slamming phones, vowing to fight. But what could he do? Rage doesn't stop Parliament. Anger doesn't unearth the traitor. For the first time, Harry, the warrior prince, found himself as powerless as his wife. Isn't that a cruel twist? The man who once fought on battlefields now fights shadows he cannot touch. And yet, Here's the most haunting part. Meghan's cry wasn't only despair. Some insiders whisper it was also rage. Rage that the people who once celebrated her now sought to erase her. Rage that her private words had been twisted into political weapons. Rage that someone she trusted had sold her out. And rage, as we know, can be fuel. So ask yourself, was that cry the end of Meghan's fight, or the beginning of something new? Was it the sound of defeat, or the war cry of a woman preparing for battle? Because here's the twist. Just hours after her breakdown, Meghan made a phone call. No one knows exactly who she called. Some say it was a powerful ally in Washington. Others believe it was a top-tier lawyer in London. A few even whisper she reached out to someone still inside the royal family. Whoever it was, the call signaled one thing. Meghan wasn't going to sit silently while Parliament dismantled her. She was preparing to fight back. But even that decision came with contradictions. How do you fight an institution without making yourself look more guilty? How do you defend yourself without feeding the very narrative Parliament wants to spin? Every move Meghan made could either save her or bury her deeper. And the media? They circled like vultures. Paparazzi swarmed Montecito. Drones buzzed overhead. Headlines screamed about Meghan's tears. Some mocked her. Some sympathized. But all of them exploited her. Every sob, every whisper, every sighting became a headline. And Meghan, already stripped raw, found herself more exposed than ever. But then came the cruelest detail of all. The envelope that shattered Meghan didn't just mention her. It hinted at involvement from someone unexpected, someone whose connection to Meghan could destabilize everything. That's why her cry was so piercing. Because it wasn't only her reputation at stake anymore. It was someone else's. Someone whose name, if revealed, could send shockwaves through both Parliament and the palace. And that's where we end this chapter. Meghan's cry in Montecito wasn't just the sound of a woman breaking. It was the sound of history shifting. Because the second envelope didn't just expand the case. It introduced a new player into the battlefield. And when their name comes out, the story won't just be about Meghan anymore. What does rage look like when it's bottled up inside a man who has spent his whole life being told to stay silent? What happens when that man, once a soldier, once a prince, once the protector of his wife, realizes he can't punch this enemy, can't shout it down, can't shield the woman he loves from the storm? That's where Harry found himself after the second envelope surfaced. Meghan had cried, her sobs echoing through Montecito, but Harry? He didn't cry. He burned. Imagine it. The same Harry who once walked behind his mother's coffin, stoic, holding grief inside. The same Harry who once charged across Afghan deserts, adrenaline pumping, facing enemies head-on. Now pacing his California home, fists clenched, jaw tight, fighting an enemy he can't even see. Parliament. The palace. Betrayers in the shadows. How do you fight whispers, letters, documents? How do you fight when the battlefield isn't physical, but political, psychological, personal? Reports say Harry was incandescent with fury. He stormed through the halls, his voice rising, demanding answers, slamming phones, calling lawyers. Some claim he shouted that the monarchy had finally crossed the line, that Parliament was being used as a weapon against him and Meghan. But here's the cruel irony. No matter how loud Harry roared in Montecito, his voice couldn't reach Westminster. His rage was real, but it was silent where it mattered most. Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how would you feel if you watched the person you love break down and you couldn't stop it? Would you fight harder? Would you lose hope? Or would you, like Harry, rage in silence while plotting your next move? Because here's the truth. Harry's silence in Britain wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Rage behind closed doors. Restraint in public. He knew every word he uttered could be twisted, every quote used against him. So he stayed quiet. But inside, he was on fire. Silent rage can be far more dangerous than loud anger. Silent rage waits. Silent rage calculates. Silent rage strikes when the enemy least expects it. And Harry had reason to be furious. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just Parliament circling Meghan. It was someone feeding Parliament from the inside. Someone close. Harry, the man who has spent decades warning about snakes in the grass of royal life, now realized one had slithered into his own garden. Who was it? Who betrayed them? That question gnawed at him, poisoned his sleep, fueled his silent rage. Here's where the contradictions rip him apart. Harry wanted to fight back, to defend Meghan publicly, to call out Parliament, the palace, the betrayer. But at the same time, he knew doing so might make things worse. If he lashed out, Parliament would say, "See? He's unfit." If he attacked the monarchy, critics would sneer, "See? They hate Britain." Every option was a trap, and Harry, the warrior, had to sit in silence. Isn't that the cruelest punishment for a man who defines himself as a protector? But his silence didn't mean inactivity. Insiders whisper that Harry immediately began reaching out quietly to allies. Lawyers in London, activists in Washington, media contacts in Hollywood. He was building a strategy, not a counterattack, but a shield. He wanted to insulate Meghan, to prevent more leaks, to prepare for the storm. And yet, even as he worked, the rage inside him grew. Because every step reminded him of one brutal truth. He was fighting shadows. You can't punch betrayal. You can't shoot down whispers. Silent rage is a cage. Think about how this dynamic affects his marriage. Meghan crying openly, Harry raging silently. One wears emotion on her sleeve, the other locks it inside. Do you see the irony? The woman once accused of being theatrical breaks down authentically. The man once seen as reckless now bites his tongue, his fury hidden. Roles reversed. And in that reversal lies a powerful question. Which one of them will snap first? Now let's take it to the political stage. Parliament wasn't blind to Harry's silence. Some MPs reportedly mocked him for it. The prince has lost his tongue, one allegedly said. Others speculated his quietness was guilt, that he knew Meghan's case was indefensible. Every day he remained silent. They grew bolder. Parliament loves silence. Silence means space. Silence means dominance. And Harry, in their eyes, was shrinking. But what if his silence was more dangerous than his words? What if, behind that silence, he was gathering something far more explosive than a soundbite? Because make no mistake, Harry knows the power of revelations. He's written them in books. He's dropped them in interviews. If he chose to unleash what he knows, the monarchy and Parliament alike could shudder. Silent rage isn't empty. Silent rage is a ticking clock. And then came the twist. Late one evening, after hours of pacing, Harry reportedly told Meghan something chilling. Something along the lines of, "If they take everything from us, I'll make sure they regret it." Meghan, still shaken from her tears, asked what he meant. Harry didn't explain. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said enough. Silent rage had become a vow. But vows are dangerous. Because they demand action. They demand a breaking point. And Harry's breaking point was fast approaching. Now here's where the contradiction deepens. Harry's silent rage wasn't just about protecting Meghan. It was about avenging Diana. He saw the parallels. A woman hounded by press, betrayed by insiders, crushed by institutions. He couldn't save his mother. But Meghan? He swore he would. That vow, born of grief decades old, now mixed with rage fresh as fire. Can you feel the weight of that? Can you imagine carrying not just your wife's pain, but your mother's ghost on your shoulders? And yet, Parliament marched on, oblivious to the volcano brewing in Montecito. They didn't hear his silence. They didn't see his rage. They only saw a duchess in tears and a duke without words. They mistook restraint for weakness. They mistook silence for surrender. And that mistake may prove catastrophic. Because here's the cliffhanger. In the days after Meghan's breakdown, Parliament received yet another anonymous leak. Not a letter this time. Not notes. But something else, something far more damning. And this time, Harry's name was on it. What happens when the judgment doesn't come from Parliament or the palace, but from the people themselves? When millions of ordinary citizens, taxpayers, voters, royal watchers, suddenly become the jury in Meghan Markle's trial by public opinion. That's what unfolded after Harry's name appeared in the latest leak. Suddenly, this wasn't just about one duchess fighting for her royal status. It became about a couple, a family, and the people of